Hello and welcome back to the course on blockchain. So to understand what Web 3.0 is, let's first understand what Web 2.0 is. Here we've got a couple of examples of websites back from the 90s, as you might remember them or you might not remember them, but this is what they looked like. And back then, simply, a website was just text, maybe some images and some links. And like in the case of the Apple, this is the Apple website, this is Amazon website. And in the case of the Apple website, like it's a bit like probably later in time or a bit more advanced because you can see like a form here, some buttons and so on. Maybe like even some advanced coloring and things like that. So yeah, good old days. This is what the web looked like. And this was Web 1.0. As you can see, it's a very different experience to what we have now. So let's have a look at the websites of Apple and Amazon as they are today. So there's Apple. Look at those vibrant colors. Look at all the menus at the top and how you can just go and watch a video right here without leaving the page. And there's the Amazon website. Again, you've got like a form here, like a search form. You've got this carousel that's changing the ads in the background there. You've got all these different other ads. They're all tracking your purchases. You're being served the most relevant things to you. There's always these pop-ups. There's these very interactive things. And I'm not even talking about social media here. That's a huge new thing in the web as well compared to web version 1.0. And so all of this together is called Web 2.0. This term was popularized in 2004 and it signifies a paradigm shift in how we experience websites and the internet. So we went from just basic text and links and images to everything moving around, things loading. You can watch videos. You can watch videos without leaving a page. You can, you have social. There's so many things going on, and some of them are listed here. A big role in Web 2.0 was played by Ajax and JavaScript, because those technologies allowed that whole transition to loading pages without refreshing, or loading elements on pages without having to refresh the page every time, or without the page refreshing itself. And that's that immersion into your experience that you get from there. And so that's Web 2.0. It was like, again, popularized in 2004. It's not like a specific date when that happened. It just all kept happening. And then people realized that we're in a different world now. And so let's map that out. On a typical website or typical experience, user experience on the web, we have a front end and a back end. The front end is what the user sees. The back end is what happens in the background, what they don't see. So in terms of front end, there's our back in Web 1.0. There's our Apple website. And now this is what looks like in Web 2.0. This front end has changed drastically. The whole experience has changed a lot. Not just what they see, but like what they feel, how the machine learning technologies are serving them ads, what videos they interact with, how the websites are remembering things they've done before and adapting to them. So that was in Web 1.0. This is in Web 2.0. But let's look at the backend. How has the backend changed? Well, backend hasn't changed much. If we don't take into account all the complex algorithms that sit in the backend, the core structure, the core architecture of how people interact with websites and things on the web is through a centralized approach. There's a central server. For instance, Apple in this case has a central server, and we're accessing it. We're requesting things from the central server, and then we're getting information back. And so this is where blockchain can play a huge part in Web 3.0 and probably will. So there's Web 3.0. We don't really know what's going to happen with the front end, because it's also important to think about that as well. That will change. Maybe it'll become all computer vision, or maybe it'll become like even more interactive, or even more AI driven, personalized, and things like that. That's not the question that we're answering here right now. The question is, how will the backend change? Well, this is where blockchain can play a major role, and we can move from a centralized web in Web 2.0 to a decentralized web in Web 3.0. And let's have a look in a bit more detail how all that can take place. So here we've got all the people in the world, and as we know, we're all interconnected. We all somebody knows somebody, and then people know each other, and there's like this whole concept of 6 degrees of separation and things like that, or now it's like even lower, that you pretty much know anybody in the world through like 4 or 5 or 6 connections. But nevertheless, even though we're all connected, when we want to interact with each other, what do? Well, we go to, for instance, Facebook, which has its centralized servers, which belong to Facebook, and all the data is stored there. And so we are actually interacting with Facebook or Facebook's servers and services, which then allow us to connect with each other. So we have that middleman, Facebook, which so far has done a great job. We got to give it to these companies for bringing us closer together. Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and so on. Like they definitely had a major role in the evolution of how society and just globally the world is connected. However, the underlying foundational principle remains that we are still interacting through a centralized way with each other through the Facebook servers. So they have control over our data, over our privacy. They can service the ads they want to service. They can charge us if they want to charge us. If they don't want to charge us, they don't. And so there's a lot of control that we're giving away to them. Whereas in Web 3.0, with the blockchain approach, the hypothesized idea is that we move back to using this interconnectivity that we have with each other. And at the same time, there would be a blockchain or multiple blockchains which would run the applications. Again, a copy of this blockchain would be stored on every single computer, and then there would be smart contracts which govern how these applications work and what happens. For instance, in the case of a social media application or social media network, these smart contracts would say what happens when a person joins, what happens when they add somebody as a friend, what happens when somebody posts something, and so on. So it's basically the code behind that social media network, and that would all be stored on a blockchain. Blockchain would be running, just as we discussed throughout this whole course, how a blockchain works. And a great example of a blockchain that already exists for this is the Ethereum blockchain, where applications are already created. When we saw an example of Steemit, which is a blockchain version of Twitter. And so basically the social media network would live on this blockchain. We would all have either our own data or fragmented bits and pieces of each other's data in an anonymized way. But the point is that the control over the data would be stored using a private key on the blockchain. So only you would have access to your own data, and you would, through your interactions and through the smart contracts, you would be able to, and through your actions, you would be able to select who gets to see your data, who doesn't, who you want to be friends with, who doesn't want to be friends with. So you get control back over your data completely entirely, because it's not stored on a centralized server. It's either stored on your computer again, or there's other ways to implement this. It can be stored in fragmented pieces all over the place, but only you can put it back together. And so therefore what we're doing is we're leveraging our own machines rather than a centralized server to help make all of this happen. All the smart contracts are executing on our machines. All the data is stored on our machines. The blockchain is running on our machines. The interconnectivity is happening between our machines. We don't really need a central server. We can have a social network which is completely, which doesn't belong to anyone. It just runs. It just exists, and it's crowdsourced, and people add to it and and take away from it, and we all vote how it develops and things like that. So a very democratized approach where we all have control over it. So, and this brings us back to that idea of the supercomputer that Ethereum is trying to build, like the global supercomputer using our little computers that we have rather than a centralized server or location. So there we go. That's how blockchain can contribute to Web 3.0. We've already seen an example of this, the Steemit website, and there's more. And in fact, I've got an interesting additional reading for you here where the author Matteo talks about the theoretical concepts and implications around blockchain or Web 3.0. And actually there's a screenshot there of the apps, how they might change, how, you know, the browser might change, storage and video calls, social networking, and so on. So you can actually see it here. Steemit is over here. So there we go. That's Web 3.0 and it's and how blockchain can play a role in that. Check out this article; it's quite popular on Medium, and yeah, it's a good idea, I think, to get up to date and upskilled with what's coming ahead, what to expect from what the internet would look like. And why? Well, because it will give you ideas on maybe how you can contribute to that, or maybe how you can participate in all of this and get started early and start, you know, transitioning your mindset. Again, this all might change in a few months, in a few years. It might look completely different to what we're speculating now, but it does look promising. It does look like a very interesting way the world could go. On that note, I hope you enjoyed today's tutorial and I look forward to seeing you next time. Until then, enjoy blockchains.